Moving on to the next segment of today's show, I wanted to talk about the Dallas Cowboys because for me, when you look at the main storylines of Week 4 and everything that happened throughout the National Football League in this Week 4 slate, the Cowboys are probably the first thing that I want to talk about. Probably the Cowboys-Browns game is the game I think that I have the most takeaways and things to talk about. So let's get into it. The Cleveland Browns beat the Dallas Cowboys to move to 3-1. And it's very interesting because when you looked at this game going in, I thought these two teams actually had a lot of similarities to each other. And what I mean by that is I think both of these teams are super talented. I think last year both of these teams had super high expectations that obviously weren't fulfilled. Both of these teams missed the playoffs. And I think going into this season, both of these teams also had big time expectations of, all right, it's playoffs or bust. They also each brought in a first. Now, experience is a different story, as this is Kevin Stefanski's first job as an NFL head coach. Mike McCarthy has obviously been the head coach of the Green Bay Packers over the last number of years until last year. And I think when you look at this, I think Cleveland and Kevin Stefanski have done a better job executing. And all of a sudden, right now, you look at the standings after this game, and the Cleveland Browns are 3-1. And I totally understand that two of those wins came against the Washington football team and the Cincinnati Bengals, two teams that, aren't really expected to do much this year. And Cleveland, when they faced Baltimore, got, blown out. So that obviously wasn't a good sign. But I think to start things off, looking at this game from a Browns perspective, when I look at this, Cleveland has a reason to be excited. They have a huge home game next week coming up against the Indianapolis Colts. But I think finally we finally saw just how good of a player Odell Beckham Jr. is. That was probably the best game I've ever seen him play in a Cleveland Brown uniform. And if I'm a Brown fan, that's a really encouraging sign because when you look at it, all right, you see that Cleveland, for the second year in a row, is probably one of the 5 or 6 most talented teams in the AFC. And going into this season, even though they had a first-year head coach, I did expect it to be playoffs or bust. I think Baker Mayfield still has a lot to prove, especially when he takes on the good opponents and the better defenses in the league like Indianapolis next week. But I think if you're Cleveland, the fact that these were the exact kind of games you weren't winning last year because of the incompetence of your coach, it's a really good sign that you're starting to play well here. And also, when you look at how Kirk Cousins has done in Minnesota since Kevin Stefanski has left, it really hasn't been that encouraging to me. So I think that shows just how valuable Kevin Stefanski is to an NFL offense. But the main story I wanted to talk about in this game is the Dallas Cowboys. And this, for me, was a pretty big game for Dallas, just because last week in Seattle, they played well for, some parts of the game, but it was just same old Cowboys. They were just super inconsistent. Their defense isn't good at all. And I just hate to say it, folks, I don't think the Dallas Cowboys are a very good football team right now. And for me, I think it starts from the top on. Jerry Jones has to realize that I just don't think Mike McCarthy's the answer. And if this Cowboys team misses the playoffs this year in probably probably the weakest anyone has seen the NFC East, let me ask you guys, is Mike McCarthy coming back next year? And here's the thing. He is lucky to be 1-3. The Cowboys had no business winning that game against the Falcons at all. If they don't cover a miracle onside kick, then they're 0-4 right now. And could you imagine what, your Skip Baylesses of the world would be thinking about these Dallas Cowboys? And Cleveland is no world beater, but I'm confident to say they're a talented, good football team. And by good, I by no means mean great, but that is why the Dallas Cowboys, I think, at home had to win this game. And in the beginning of the game, I thought Dallas was off to a really good start. Cleveland gets the touchdown by Odell to get up 7-0, and then the Cowboys score a touchdown, and then they score a huge second touchdown on a 4th and 2 pass to Amari Cooper, and it was one of the better throws by Dak I've seen in a long time. But maybe it's a good thing right now that there's a limit on the number of Cowboy fans allowed in AT&T Stadium, because they had to watch this game, man. And this was not the Kansas City Chiefs. This was not the Baltimore Ravens. As good and as talented as the Cleveland Browns may be, I think we all understand they're still super unproven. And I do think there are some people around football that would just tell you they don't think Baker Mayfield is that good. I still believe in him. I still think he could be a player. But Baker Mayfield was not very good last year. And he went into Dallas and played pretty well. The Cleveland Browns team as a whole went into Dallas and played pretty well. And this was the Browns who lost Nick Chubb, one of the best running backs in the league, to injury in the first half. And this was the Cleveland Browns. They haven't scored 30 points in 3 straight games since 1968. And these Browns had 31 points in the first half. Through 4 games, the Cowboys have allowed 164 points, the most in franchise history. The expansion era Cowboys in 1960 allowed 136 points in the first 4 games of the season, and they finished 0-11-1. In 2000, the Cowboys allowed 135 points in their first 4 games on their way to a 5-11 record. And I think when you look at these current Dallas Cowboys, the way I see it, they could be trending to go on that same down that same road. The Cowboys in this game against the Browns allowed 24 first downs in the first half. They didn't allow more than 23 in any of the first 3 games total. They also allowed 333 yards in the first 2 quarters and 7.7 yards per play. Also, the Cowboys allowed the most rushing yards in the game in 307 in team history. That's crazy. And the Cowboys offense, I understand it's not the main culprit here. I get it. I would put that on the coach and the defensive coordinator. But it's not completely without blame here. Dak and Zeke had back-to-back turnovers in the second quarter, which were turned into 14 points by the Cleveland Browns. For me, that's a problem. And I mentioned earlier in this podcast when we were doing the 10 observations from the week that even though Dak Prescott clearly has better numbers than Carson Wentz right now, sometimes I'm just all about the W's. And I couldn't have never saw Dak Prescott lead his team like Carson Wentz did the other night, just full of complete nobodies, and go into San Francisco, albeit against a team full of backups, and get the job done. Like, I think Carson Wentz deserves credit for that, considering the fact that his team just was not playing very good football going into the game. And even though his numbers weren't great, I do believe watching that game down the stretch, he carried his team to victory. Even though Dak Prescott's numbers have been really good, the bottom line is I just haven't really seen it with him. I think he's, pretty locked in for me as like the 8th or 10th best quarterback in the league with not too high of a ceiling. He's good, but look at the situation he has around him and the situation he's had around him since he's entered the league. One of the best offensive lines in the league, one of the best running backs in the league, a plethora of good receivers over the years like Dez Bryant, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup. You guys know the names. And here's the thing about this game. The Cowboys actually made it interesting in late in the second half where they maybe had you thinking that this game was going to be a repeat of the game of the Week 2 game against the Atlanta Falcons. And they made it interesting. Prescott hit CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper for the 2-point conversion to cut it to, originally it was a 41-14 deficit, and now all of a sudden it was 41-38 with 3:42 to play. And then the Cowboys defense just comes up clutch again. Odell Beckham, 37-yard touchdown for Jarvis Landry. He started the game like that, and he ends the game like that with a 50-yard touchdown run. And Aldon Smith could not get Beckham for what would have been a 12-yard loss on the reverse. OBJ zigzags right through the Cowboys defender for what turned out to be the game-winning score. And Mike McCarthy now has a 1-3 record for the second time in his coaching career. In 2006, his first year with the Packers, he started out 1-4, finished 8-8, and he has never had a team start 1-3 and make the playoffs. 5 times his Packers were 2-2 after 4 games, and 4 times they ended up making the playoffs. When you look at the Cowboys in this game, man, I think their defensive coordinator, Mike Nolan, deserves a lot of blame here because when you look at Mike McCarthy, he came into Dallas as the head coach this year telling everyone, look, I'm different than Jason Garrett. I'm super analytical. I took a year off from coaching, and I'm going to be the guy that takes this Cowboy team that is super talented to the promised land. But I've never believed in Mike McCarthy. I think if he wasn't able to win with Aaron Rodgers, why would he be able to win with Dak Prescott, especially when historically this Cowboy team just doesn't win games. And I'm never going to trust them to win big games, especially until proven otherwise. Even though Philadelphia is super banged up, I really appreciate their toughness and the fact that they went on the road and got a big time win on Sunday Night Football. But Dallas, I can never see them getting a win like that until proven otherwise. But Mike Nolan deserves a lot of blame here. His Cowboys defense just couldn't get anything going. And I understand some guys on this defense are super banged up right now when you look at Leighton Vander Esch and the fact that he's hurt. But I'll say this defense has too many talented names to be this bad. Where is DeMarcus Lawrence? I know Aldon Smith has been playing super well, so that's a big name that you could be building around. Jalen Smith, the secondary has been awful. The corner, Darryl Worley, that just got absolutely roasted on that Odell Beckham touchdown. What was that? And Mike Nolan's game plan in this game for the Dallas Cowboys was just hideous. And if I'm Mike McCarthy, I'm really considering firing this guy and not having him as my defensive coordinator for the rest of the season, because I totally understand Mike McCarthy owes it to Mike Nolan to be a big. Mike Nolan is a big reason why Mike McCarthy is a head coach in the National Football League. Because if you remember, Mike Nolan, when he was the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers, hired Mike McCarthy to be on his staff, and that's ultimately how Mike McCarthy had his first NFL job, and ultimately he turned that into being the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. So that's really why Mike McCarthy hired Mike Nolan in the first place this season to be his defensive coordinator. But at the same time, if you looked closer and closer at the metrics, Mike Nolan's defenses in Atlanta the last time he was a DC were not only bad, they were historically bad. And historically, this Dallas Cowboy defense, despite all the talent they've had, has never been that good. Last year, they were not good at all. They were just about average. And as many points and as many numbers as Dak Prescott could put up, I'm never going to trust this Cowboy team to win until proven otherwise. If you can't beat the Cleveland Browns at home, if you, give up 45 points, in 3 of 4 games in a row, just don't talk to me. I don't consider you to be a legitimate contender until proven otherwise. It's not like you have Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. It's not like you have even a Lamar Jackson or a Russell Wilson. Dak Prescott is good. He's not great. He needs a team and, more importantly, a defense, I think, in order to succeed.